Blog Talk Radio.
1100, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Malaysia, New Zealand, Senegal, and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. One 1100, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Malaysia, New
It was a creed written into the founding documents that declares the destiny of a nation.
1100, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Malaysia, New Zealand.
It was a creed written into the founding documents that declares the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. It was sung by immigrants as they struck out to the distant shores, pioneers pushed westward against unforgiving wilderness. Oh, yes, we can. It was the call of workers to organize. Women who reached for the ballot. A president who chose the moon as our new frontier. And a king who took us to the mountaintop. Pointed the way to the promised land. Yes, we can to justice.
1100, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Malaysia, New Zealand, Senegal, and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I shall now give the floor to members of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this important meeting at such short notice. Malaysia, together with New Zealand, Venezuela, and Senegal as co-sponsors of the draft resolutions on the issue of illegal Israeli settlements, are calling for this meeting to put the draft to vote. As representatives of various regional groupings at the United Nations, the Asia-Pacific Group, WEOG, the African Group, and GRULAC, we are bound by similar aims and sense of responsibility to take effective actions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, especially on the issue of settlements. In numerous council meetings on Palestine and at the Area Formula meeting on settlements last October, we listened to repeated calls by council members, the United Nations Secretary General, the Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, the civil society, as well as other UN member states for urgent council actions to halt settlement activities and reverse the negative trends that are threatening peace and the viability. The latest unprecedented attempt by the Israeli parliament to legalize outposts on private Palestinian lands added further urgency for the Council to send a clear signal on the issue of settlements. Malaysia acknowledged the efforts by Egypt and the Arab League for engaging in consultations with Council members over the past 2 months on this issue. We fully support their effort, and we share their aim for Council action. We also observe an emerging consensus among Council members that it is urgent for the Council to seize the opportunity for effective Council action without any further delay. The draft resolution being put to vote today calls for the cessation of all Israeli settlement activities and for affirmative steps to reverse the negative trends on the ground that are endangering the two-state solutions. It also calls for immediate steps to prevent all acts of violence against civilians, including acts of terror, and calls for accountability. The text further urges all parties to intensify their efforts to achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East and to end Israeli occupations. On the implementations of the resolutions, the text is requesting that the Secretary General report to the Council every 3 months. Mr. President, we realize that some Council members may have legitimate concerns on the short period of time in which the draft was officially circulated, put to blue, and tabled for adoption. In normal and ideal circumstances, we too would act carefully in view of the sensitivities of the resolutions on settlement was over 36 years ago. Since then, the situation on the ground has worsened to a point where the very prospect of the two-state solutions is now in question. There is no doubt that this falls under the responsibility of the Security Council under the United Nations Charter to maintain international peace and security. We thus appeal to all Council members not to lose this opportunity for peace and to exercise our legal, political, and moral responsibility to vote in support of the draft resolutions, which is based on previous Council resolutions, the values and the principles of the United Nations Charter, international law, and international standards of human rights. The time for action is now to
support the use of any additional land for the purpose of settlements during the transitional period. Indeed, the immediate adoption of a settlement freeze by Israel, more than any other action, could create the confidence needed for wider participation in these talks. Further settlement activity is in no way necessary for the security of Israel and only diminishes the confidence of the Arabs that a final outcome can be freely and fairly negotiated. That's the end of the quote. This was said in 1982 by President Ronald Reagan. He was speaking about a new proposal that he was launching to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. While ultimately, of course, President Reagan's proposal was not realized, his words are still illuminating in at least 2 respects. First, because they underscore the United States' deep and long-standing commitment to achieving a comprehensive and lasting peace between the Israelis and Palestinians. That has been the policy of every administration, Republican and Democrat, since before President Reagan and all the way through to the present day. Second, because President Reagan's words highlight the United States' long-standing position that Israeli settlement activity in territories occupied in 1967 undermines Israel's security, harms the viability of a negotiated two-state outcome, and erodes prospects for peace and stability in the region. Today, the Security Council reaffirmed its established consensus that settlements have no legal validity. The United States has been sending the message that the settlements must stop privately and publicly for nearly 5 decades. Through the administrations of President Lyndon B. Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and now Barack Obama. Indeed, since 1967, the only president who had not had at least one Israeli-Palestinian-related Security Council resolution pass during his tenure is Barack Obama. So our vote today is fully in line with the bipartisan history of how American presidents have approached both the issue and the role of this body. Given the consistency of this position across U.S. administrations, one would think that it would be a routine vote for the U.S. to allow the passage of a resolution with the elements in this one, reaffirming the longstanding U.S. position on settlements, condemning violence and incitement, and calling for the parties to start taking constructive steps to reverse current trends on the ground. These are familiar, well-articulated components of U.S. policy. But in reality, this vote for us was not straightforward because of where it is taking place, at the United Nations. For the simple truth is that for as long as Israel has been a member of this institution, Israel has been treated differently from other nations at the United Nations. And not only in decades past, such as the infamous resolution that the General Assembly adopted in 1975 with the support of the majority of member states, officially determining that Zionism is a form of racism, but also in 2016, this year. One need only look at the 18 resolutions against Israel adopted during the UN General Assembly in September, or the 12 Israel-specific resolutions adopted this year in the Human Rights Council, more than those focused on Syria, North Korea, Iran, and South Sudan put together, to see that in 2016 Israel continues to be treated differently from other member states. Like U.S. administrations before it, the Obama administration has worked tirelessly to fight for Israel's right simply to be treated just like any other country. From advocating for Israel to finally be granted membership to a UN regional body, something no other UN member state had been denied, to fighting to ensure that Israeli NGOs are not denied UN accreditation simply because they are Israeli, to getting Yom Kippur finally recognized as a UN holiday, to pressing this council to break its indefensible silence in response to terrorist attacks on Israelis. As the United States has said repeatedly, such unequal treatment not only hurts Israel, it undermines the legitimacy of the United Nations itself.
The week that was on the 24th of December 2016, coming to you from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. This is also a special presentation with BR on the World. That is our international program, and we're covering the events at the UN, the special resolution on the illegal settlement in the Israeli state. And we go from the standpoint of both the Israeli media, the Times of Israel, and Haaretz, the Israeli Defense Forces newspaper, and also RT, the Russian broadcast system, to bring about some of the history. And finally, we'll hear from the ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, an all-American hero, the woman that coined the term the monster, which we used in the 2008 and 2012 campaign, Hillary the Monster Clinton. She is an exemplary person. This resolution came at a time in history that the clock has to move forward, however slowly it is moving. On the 20th of January, a reactionary regime will come in to the American presidency. But history will not stop, nor will history let some tiny nation like the Zionist nation of Israel stand in the way of world progress. Peace for the humanity. Now, what is basically happening in the Middle East as we see it, it's down now according to DJ Trump, and he will be, as they say, running the show. He claims the UN will change as his administration. But the world is not based upon what DJ Trump does, nor Bibi Netanyahu. Those people have their responsibilities. The world's nations have their responsibility. The vote was 14 to 1 nation that abstained. That was the U.S. But it really doesn't matter. The Security Council would have voted 13 to 1, which means a majority of the world's people. And this is something the Zionists have to understand. They are pitted against a majority of the world's people. The resolution by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, New Zealand, Mal-